Okay, hello and welcome everyone to the new Morningstar ProStar MPPT reveal. My name is Jim Egan. I'm the training manager here at Morningstar. Hopefully everybody can hear me and see the screen okay. Today we're going to obviously reveal the new controller. We're going to give you a little bit of a company overview, address your needs, what the customer requested and wanted from a new controller, and the ProStar MPPT features, the accessories that can be used with this controller, the competitive advantages, and of course question and answer session, which by the way you can certainly type in your question and we will answer them as we go through, time permitting. This is scheduled for an hour, but I certainly don't anticipate it taking that long, but please feel free to ask your questions throughout and we'll get to them as we go through. So those of you familiar with Morningstar know we've been in business for over 20 years, and during that time the ownership management has not changed. The strategy has remained the same. Most of the employees at Morningstar are long-term employees. The distribution channels established and new, the strategy remains the same. And that ties into, of course, the overall business strategy of Morningstar. You may also know we are a global solutions company. We've been providing industrial and consumer off-grid PV application products in a quantity of over 3 million charge controllers and inverters throughout the world from over 200 distributors in over 100 countries. These are our product offerings. You can see the top MPPT controllers has been expanded in recent months to include the TriStar and of course the ProStar and the SunSaver. Below we have the PWM controllers, and of course below that is the accessories, which we will cover in a little bit as they relate to the ProStar. So like I said, this is built around customer needs. Customers wanted more mid-tier power options between 300 and 1,000 watts, paired with integrated load control. You also wanted a better onboard meter, which offers full field adjustability and a large clear interface with advanced data logging. Compatibility with Morningstar's accessories, so you can build in relay control of other equipment and open data interface, so you can communicate and integrate with the customer site hardware. And the ProStar has the widest available operating temperature range, so you can install it inside a cabinet anywhere and don't have to worry about reliability, overheating, etc. You basically set it and forget it. We get a lot of requests for that. They just want to set this up and forget about it. And also a full complement of professional industry certifications. So this is very important. We have global listings and certifications ensuring quality and reliability in Europe and of course North America. So we have obtained all of these and we listened and delivered. Basically, this is what the new controller will look like. It does look like. To the left, of course, that's the these are both compact versions, if you will. The left, of course, has no meter, and the version on the right has the backlit LED display with the directional buttons in the shape of an arrow. These are your models, the available models, 25 amp charge rating and 40 amp charge rating. If you notice, each model has the meter option, so that's something you can purchase in either of those two controllers. If you notice, the 25 amp model has a 25 amp load rating. When you get up to the 40 amp charge controller, it has a 30 amp load rating. Now, the actual power into your batteries is based on voltage. So you can, though, apply more power into the controller than it is rated for. For example, if you have a 350 watt rated controller, in the case of the 25 amp charge control, you can have a 500 watt array. As long as your voltage is within range, you are fine. It's going to basically limit or restrict that. It's not going to damage the controller. It'll actually, it's better to optimize the full power input as much as you possibly can. Use the controller to its limit. It'll prove to be more efficient for you. You don't have to worry about exactly sizing your array to the input specs. So the current is limited to the max controller current rating. Just keep an eye on that voltage. In the advanced electronic design we have a single coated circuit board, so there's no connection points between multiple boards. And we also utilize the latest ARM processor. This provides real fast sweeping control for max power point tracking, and it consumes very, very little power and has advanced software features. So there are three independently controlled stages, if you will, which are incredibly integral into the efficiency of the maximum power point tracking feature on this charge controller. You notice these on the left with the arrows there. That's basically part of our proprietary ProStar MPPT feature. And another really cool feature of the ProStar is it does its own self-verification, if you will. During manufacturing, it's the bed of nails concept, if you will, is seen here for those of you familiar with SMT and printed circuit board assembly and testing. The ProStar does its own self-calibration and verification. Many other controllers, if not all, require manual calibration, whereas the ProStar does this all by itself consistently. So in terms of specs, we have a 12-24 volt battery auto detection mode, so you don't have to program that or configure it. It knows automatically. This is the voltage I was referring to before. This is what you really have to be careful of. 120 volt open circuit voltage. Do not exceed this rating because this will destroy the controller, and make sure you pay attention to the coldest temperature available so that you don't see a voltage climb when the temperature drops. The operating temperature is extremely vast, -40 to +60, up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, so you can install this in an enclosure and not worry about the heat affecting the operation of the controller. And it has very little self-consuming power requirements, so less than 25 milliamps if you're not using a meter version. If you opt for the meter version, it's less than 40 milliamps. It has no fan, which is extremely important. You don't want any moving parts. Everything is solid state, so there are no moving parts. There's a very high weighted efficiency. Even at full power, max power, we don't see a dip in efficiency like a lot of our competitors do. I have a couple of graphs just to demonstrate that real quickly coming up here. There's advanced battery programming, which will include lithium batteries. There are special circumstances where you may have NiCad or lithium and you need to adjust the charge control settings. That's available on this ProStar. And it has field adjustable lighting control and 200 days of local storage on the board for data logging. What's new too is there's a graphical view on the meter version of your data logging. So it provides a graph rather than just numbers and values. On the communications options, we have one port with two options. So there's a single RJ11 port, but you can choose to either use it in the meter or data mode. The Morningstar meter bus selection, if you choose that, you have bus power and control data in one cable. which is used by the Morningstar accessories, and it has low bandwidth. It's our proprietary protocol, or you can opt to use the RS-232-485 isolated Modbus protocol. So that's used obviously for programming, data logging, etc., site communications. These are the certifications and listings I mentioned earlier. The CE compliance, ETL, listed to UL 1741, and of course CSA 22.2, and the IEC 62109, which is a global standard. This also complies with the NEC, and it is manufactured in an ISO 9001 certified facility. This is an example of the efficiency I was mentioning earlier. If you notice, once it reaches max weighted power, it plateaus and levels off. It does not dip, it does not derate or falter after it reaches its max potential. You can see here, this is an example of 62 volts max power or 93 volts max power. This next slide shows more of a zoomed in view of that chart, but we put a competitor's performance in as well. So you can see this is actually the top end of that previous chart. Once we achieve that high power, we stabilize, dip very, very little, whereas the competitors drop off, and there's 3 to 5% difference in efficiency, which is critical, especially on those full power days when you want to harvest as much energy as possible. There are internal protections. Fusing is not included. That's something you would provide in the field if necessary or desired. But internally, there are reverse polarity protections, so you're not going to damage the controller if you were to reverse polarity, overload it, or short circuit it. The high voltage warning is just that. It is a warning. However, like I said before, we definitely want to make sure you pay attention to the input voltage. That's the biggest issue for this controller when making connections. Your battery voltage will give you a high voltage indication if it does exceed the programmed limit. Your load protection, reverse polarity, and short circuit as well. There are high and low temperature protections with current reduction. As you may or may not know, in low temperatures, lithium ion can be difficult to take a full charge if charge at all. So there are parameters you can adjust in the controller to compensate for that. And there is a transient surge protection. It is not necessarily going to protect the controller against lightning. I highly recommend, personally, I've always installed lightning protection on systems I've installed. The lightning protection would protect your system components as well as obviously the controller. This 4500 watt on all terminals is for a transient, but obviously not necessarily a significant transient, generally maybe from another piece of equipment in the system, but not lightning. Now your connections, if you're familiar with the old ProStar, this is obviously larger. This has up to number 2 gauge power terminals and remote temperature sensor. You can, if you see on the lower right hand side of the controller, you could use one cable for this purpose, containing 4 conductors. This is for remote temperature and voltage directly from the battery. This is something you don't necessarily have to install, but it's highly recommended. There is a board-mounted internal temperature sensor, but you definitely get more effective charging and readings from the remote sensors. They're mounted directly to the battery. So what we've added to here is, and you'll see on the next slide, for wiring covers, we have a standard wiring cover that just simply covers the wiring terminal connections. but we've also developed an optional wire box. This provides a wiring compartment. You could terminate conduit and cable glands to it, and this is basically what it looks like. It's not quite as large as it may seem. There's nothing here to really scale it to, but what it's done is extended the bottom of the controller, and you can see it has concentric knockouts. There are knockouts in the bottom and one on either side. Half-inch, 3/4 trade size, or M20. There are 4 of those, and there's one 3/4 by 1 inch concentric knockout on the bottom. So this provides you not only with protection, it provides a touch-safe environment, makes it a lot neater, and it also gives you a lot more wiring space and termination options. It's much nicer to terminate in a cable, if you're using a cable, use a cable gland to terminate, or conduit. So this provides that. And it is made out of a high-strength polycarbonate Lexan. Dip switch settings come from the factory, basically as the factory default. That's the fastest way to take it out of the box in a standard configuration. However, there are many options, and I don't expect you to remember this from the presentation. This is certainly all in the installation manual, which, by the way, we also do include our efficiency graphs, and if you're familiar with some of the competition, they wouldn't dare do that. We're proud of the efficiencies, so we include those in our manual as well. These are some configurations. You can move or change the dip switch setting from the factory default. Switch 1 is your regular low voltage disconnect or lighting load type. That'll give you your dusk to dawn control. Switches 2 and 3 are battery voltage. You could decide or choose between fixed and auto. 4, 5, and 6 is your battery type. And switch 7 is auto or manual equalization mode. 8 is for your COM port selection, like we covered earlier. You decide between the meter bus or mod bus. So here's an overview. Again, this is in the manual. This gives you an overview of the different types of batteries you may have and what you would set the dip switch settings to. At the bottom, if you notice, number 8 is custom. So that's where you can tweak the absorption stage volts, basically every aspect of every stage of the charging process for your battery. Typically, for your NiCad or your lithium ion. This is where you would be able to specifically get in there and configure the charge controller for that battery technology. So the meter display is really cool. This is a new feature, new design. It has graphics and an LCD matrix. It's got a bright LED backlit. So you can see this in low light. If you put it in an enclosure, if it's in a basement or a shed, etc., you could see this thing very easily. And it has auto scroll. It's a very intuitive display. And to navigate through this display, it actually has intuitive backlit buttons. So if you remember, there are arrows in buttons in the shape of arrows. Those, when you select an option on the menu, will illuminate, giving you the options available for you to choose. So you can't break the programming. If you make a mistake or select the wrong choice, you could simply go back. You can always go back to the default dip switch settings, or you could go through the the meter and go back to the factory default settings as well. So you could use this meter interface to program this very simply. So this is something I'm not going to go over, but I did want to show you how advanced this menu option is, and the backlit buttons there in the shape of arrows. So the display has large font. It's clearly illuminated. It's very easy to navigate through, and yes, this is in the manual. Like I said, I'm certainly not going to go through all of this, but it gives you a good idea as to how extensive your options are for field configuration. And you don't have to connect your laptop to the charge controller to perform this programming. You certainly can if you choose to, but you don't have to if you can use the meter display to navigate through the configuration. So using this meter, you can set your standard charge settings, advanced charge settings for your special use cases, like I mentioned before, your load control, you have voltage disconnect or reconnect, and your timers and triggers for your lighting controls. So like I mentioned, a lithium ion, if you have, or a nickel cadmium, the absorption, float, and equalization, you could set the voltage and stages, timer of the time of that stage. Depending on what your application is, all of this is adjustable and configurable through the meter interface in the field. You could also adjust the low voltage disconnect and reconnect for your loads. Really nice for the lighting control. Your events, you can set your trigger, what is going to activate the event, and then of course you can adjust your timer for the duration. The sunrise and sunset threshold, if you just want to leave it at that, of course is based on the percentage of your open circuit voltage from the array. This is extremely handy in terms of programming for multiple events, like for 2 events that can be performed in a single night. Extremely effective for, say, bus stops where you would have an on-off-on scenario. That could all be done again through the meter interface. You could also do the custom settings. So your battery temperature foldback or reduction, this is where your lithium ion, I mentioned earlier about the temperature affecting the charge ability in that battery bank from the controller. So you can not necessarily override, but you can customize these temperature compensation charge algorithms for your battery depending on the technology. Adjusting your high voltage and low voltage disconnect, etc., your regulation voltage, the absorption extension. So after a deep cycle period, you can actually increase or decrease, depending on what your situation is, the absorption time and your temp comp variations. This is a programming view. If you do decide to connect using your laptop, this is what you would see on MS View, excuse me. Very similar to what you would see on the screen, but in a maybe of the meter, but a little larger, obviously. And these are the accessories compatible with the ProStar MPPT. We have the remote meter on the left. And the data interface, we have the USB, the meter bus adapter, and the 485 RS232 adapter as well. Relay driver if you wanted to set up alarms, controlling external equipment, and of course a meter hub. So some of their competitive advantages, if you're familiar with Morningstar, you probably know most, if not all of this. We are more than 3 to 5% efficient than competition at full power. This controller does not produce much heat at all, less than half, in fact, at max power than our competitors in the same power range. There's a wide operating temperature range, so it's effective in extreme climates. Up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit is a pretty significant high-end temperature, without affecting the operation or performance of the controller. There are no relays, it's all solid state, no fuses like I mentioned before, and we offer a 5-year standard warranty while our competitors typically offer 2. So we wanted to provide you with the most powerful programming options without complicated menus. I know that menu tree or menu map, if you will, looked pretty extensive. It is extensive, but it's not complicated. It's simple and easy to go through. There's a full-featured lighting control built into the controller, and it is compatible with most data-enabled Morningstar accessories, including full Modbus. It's compatible with new and existing battery technologies. We are quick to respond to new battery technologies, as most of you, if not all of you know. Of course, the batteries have come a long way in the last few years alone. They're coming up with new technologies all the time, so we are responsive to those requests and industry demands. Another thing too to note is I mentioned up to 2 gauge on the power terminals. That's an extremely robust terminal connection for a small controller. You obviously need to torque down on a wire that size, and we provide that because there are cases where you may have this controller at a far distance from the array. That's why you would need up to 115 VOC, 120 VOC down to the controller. You need to torque down on, say, a number 2. It's not going to break or strip. These are robust terminals. This is also the first mid-range charge controller with PowerPoint tracking that's fully UL and IEC listed and certified. There's 2 versions of it, with or without the meter, and then with or without the wiring box. And there are full remote external temperature and voltage sensors. I can't recommend this enough. Definitely worth installing the remote temperature and voltage sensor. There is a local temperature sensor on the board in the controller. However, for the best charging, this is what's highly recommended. It's also a Morningstar signature feature of our controllers. So at this point, I know there have been some questions. We've been answering them as they come in. There's a couple of, this is basically an introduction. We're not going to get into specific technical issues depending on how lengthy they are. We are certainly more than happy to answer your questions offline. If they require more information and more time, you could give us a call or email us at info@morningstarcorp.com, and I will, let's see, I'll answer some questions here that just came in, haven't been answered yet. What languages are displayed on the inverter? I'm sorry, on the interface of the charge controller. We have English, French, Spanish, and German languages available on the meter interface. And what applications can this controller be used for? Basically, anything you've been using the smaller controllers for, but with more advantages, obviously, in this new MPPT version. Lighting, remote monitoring, boats, RVs, traffic signaling, of course, load controls, and residential. Very versatile in all its applications. It's been asked if we can send the slides, the presentation out. This will be available on our webpage. I believe if it's not there now, it will be today. So we would be more than happy to share that with you. Pricing, that's something I don't touch. I'm in training and technical assistance. That's a commercial question. Be more than happy to, if you were to give us a call or email, the sales engineer would certainly be happy to provide that for you. In terms of availability, this is basically available as today. If you want to place your order today, by all means. But yeah, I don't get into the pricing. Let's see, we have another question here. What happens to the screen if it drops below -40? That is super cold. I mean, it's got LCD and it's an LED backlit. So after about -30, it's going to start slowing down, if not freezing up on you. But it's not going to damage the screen. It's not going to affect its performance. But you're probably going to lose visibility if you're out there in that climate. Yeah, you're probably not going to be able to use it after about -30. However, once it warms up again, like any other LCD or backlit display, it will certainly work fine. It's not going to damage it. Conversely, in the extreme heat, it may disappear as well, but it'll come back when the temperature has stabilized. I've got a question here about the TriStar controllers. Will they be phased out? No, absolutely not. This is just a mid-range option, if you will. This is not something is designed to replace other controllers. It's basically giving you more options for installations and applications. Also, your 48 volt option for the TriStar is something preferred as well. So no, definitely not. What else we got? Is there an alarm system for a low state of charge? We don't have alarms, if you will. There are no audible alarms. You'll certainly get an indication in a light indicator, the indicator light, but it's not, this isn't something you could set up your relay driver if you wanted to include audible and visual alarms at a different location from the controller. If the controller's in a shed or a basement and you wanted to put a light on the outside or maybe a little audible siren of some kind of speaker, that's certainly possible. It doesn't come with that capability other than the LED indicator. And I believe that concludes the questions. What sort of timeline for bringing other controllers up to IEC 62109? That is an ongoing process. We are constantly moving forward in that. We understand that, in a global market, that's a standard we obviously need to comply with. So that's in process as we speak, making progress on that daily. And so this is good to hear. Morningstar is known for good documentation. Assuming that the manuals for the new ProStars will have good documentation as well. Absolutely. That is something we pride ourselves on and strive to continue to do for you guys. That's the first level of technical support. When I conduct trainings in person, many of the questions I get can be answered by simply reading the manual, and admittedly, most of us, myself included, do not read the manuals. We just want to plug it in and we can figure it out and get it to work. But yes, the documentation is extremely critical, and we are always making sure our manuals are up to date and accurate and have the latest information. Let's see, purchase directly, may I purchase directly from you? That's again another commercial question. Sales engineers would be happy to answer that. Typically we do sell through distribution. That's our sales model. So there are some exceptions, but that's not something I'm qualified to speak to. Definitely reach out to us, give us a call or email us, and a sales engineer would definitely be happy to talk to you about that. Okay, so I'm not getting any more questions, and I really appreciate you attending today. We appreciate your feedback, and keep your requests coming in, because like I said before, Morningstar, one of the biggest advantages, and I could speak from personal experience. I've installed Morningstar products, have been in the field over 20 years, and I'm really thrilled to be part of the Morningstar team, because it's not a reactive organization. We're a responsive company, very concerned with the customer's requests and needs. So by all means, provide your feedback to us and give us your suggestions, and we'll definitely move forward with working on getting those out to you as soon as possible. All right, well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank you again for your time, and we look forward to your business. Thanks again.